In this video, we are covering Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality. Freud's theory falls under the psychodynamics perspective, obviously because he was the founding figure of psychodynamics. Under this theory, I want you to remember 6 key vocabulary terms: conscious, preconscious, and unconscious, also known as subconscious, and then id, ego, and superego. The psychoanalytic theory of personality uses an awesome visualization of an iceberg to kind of organize the components of the personality and the mind. So what we're going to cover right now is the main 3 parts of that iceberg. Basically, you could think of the iceberg with the tip sitting above the water, and then you have, a section that's right below the water in kind of the less deep or the more shallow water. And then you have the main bulk of the iceberg, which sits in the deep, dark waters of the ocean. And these areas of the iceberg represent parts of the human mind, because obviously, especially in Freud's time, we didn't have the technology we have now, like MRI, to be able to go in and investigate the human brain and the components and how they work together and how all of that could end up representing a mind, etc. And even now, we don't really have a great definition for what the mind is. So when you're dealing with something that's intangible, something you can't hold in your hand, it becomes hard to kind of organize that content and to give it some type of form. So Freud created this form, which is basically the iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg above the water would represent the conscious mind. So you're watching this video right now, you're organizing the content, you're paying attention to what I'm saying, hopefully, and you're using your conscious mind while you're doing that. What about that preconscious, the stuff that sits just below the surface of the water, in the shallow water? I look at the preconscious mind as kind of your memories. So if I ask you, what did you eat for dinner last night? You should be able to stop and think. You're kind of accessing from the conscious mind into that preconscious, and you're pulling the information back up. And you should be able to answer what you ate for dinner last night, because the information in the preconscious is accessible in the conscious mind. You're just not using it right now. Now, the unconscious or the subconscious, that's a different story. That's the stuff that's in the very deep, dark part of the ocean. So you're looking at a big bulk of the iceberg that drives the person to do things, but that the person doesn't have any access to consciously. So Freud really believed that your early childhood experiences and your drive forces, such as your libidinal urges — he was big on sexuality and how that drove people — really drive you from that unconscious mind, that big bulk of the mind that sits in the darkest parts of the water, and that they'll drive you in ways that you aren't even aware of because you don't have access to that information in the conscious mind. And then what the point of therapy becomes, usually for someone working in psychodynamics, using the psychodynamics perspective, would be basically to help some of those driving forces, those things that are causing a person to behave in a poor way, to surface to the conscious mind, where they can be dealt with and handled with and then released, so that the person no longer is driven in these ways that they were once driven. In Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality, the personality is actually broken down into 3 parts as well. You have the id, the ego, and the superego, and the id is going to be based mainly in the subconscious or the unconscious mind, because it's a driving force. It's like your libidinal urges, your biological urges, and some of the things that are your deeper and darker forces in your life. So the id is mainly going to be housed in that subconscious mind. And I look at the id as really like a devil on your shoulder. So it's telling you, I want this, get it for me. Now, the superego is going to be like the angel on your other shoulder, and the superego represents the moral part of the personality. It's formed basically from learning from your parents. Your parents help you to shape your superego. So do maybe other members of the community if you belong to church, etc. The superego, again, is going to be the counter force to the id. It's going to be your morality, and it's going to maybe say, in the example I gave, we can't steal something. The ego, then, is the part of the personality that you know of as the I, or the self. It's also what others see. The ego moderates over the id and the superego. The ego determines the best course of action to satisfy both. In the example I gave, the ego might say, I know you want this, but we have to make money to get it. We can't steal it. So the ego moderates over both the id and the superego and helps to determine who you are as a person. Now, Freud's approach to psychology, which falls again under the psychodynamic perspective, also incorporates additional theories. I see these as sort of sub-theories that fall under the psychodynamic theory of personality as a whole. I gave you the 6 vocabulary terms I want you to focus on, but really these theories fall under that umbrella of the psychoanalytic theory of personality because they help to describe how a person develops personality, especially the psychosexual stages of development, which there are 5 stages. There's also Freud's theory of defense mechanisms, which is really interesting. That really describes that there are 3 types of anxieties, and if you encounter some type of a situation where one of these anxieties is created inside of you, that you'll use a defense mechanism to try and protect yourself. So you're going to bury down the information that you can't confront face on, and you're going to use a defense mechanism to kind of protect yourself. So that's a pretty interesting theory as well. Also, you have Freud's dream theory. Absolutely love Freud's dream theory. I know when I first encountered Freud, I remember thinking, okay, what's wrong with this guy? Maybe a little bit too much cocaine packed into your dentures, because he used to have to pack cocaine into his dentures because there was pain in his gums. Or maybe some serious sexual issues or mommy issues, etc. I really urge you, though, because over the years I found that Freud's theories are amazing and very, very applicable if you know how to use them. And there's a creative use that needs to occur with the use of Freud's theories. But I really encourage you to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. And what I mean by that is, even if you look at these theories and you think, okay, what's going on here? Try to understand the organization of the content and really look for usability and application potential in this group of theories that fall under the psychoanalytic theory of personality, because I really have found for myself that starting out, you're probably not going to be really good at using the theories, but as you grow in your knowledge set and as you start to see the organization, you might find what I found, and that is that these theories are amazing and very, very usable if you use them creatively. Okay, so that's it for Freud's psychoanalytic theory of personality. Make sure that you understand the overarching focuses of each theory along with the vocabulary components of each, and that you understand how the vocabulary is used within each theory. I strongly recommend that you create a mental map for each of these theories. See you in class.